Mara Jennings had always lived a quiet life. She wasn't the kind of person people noticed when she walked into a room. She dressed modestly, spoke softly, and worked part-time as a librarian in a small town outside of Austin, Texas. Most of her time was spent either sorting through returned books or sipping tea by the window of her modest one-bedroom apartment. She had no social media following, no loud opinions, and no flair for the dramatic. But there was something about her that people often overlooked. A quiet persistence. And it was that same persistence that brought her to the doors of Iron Ground Jiu-Jitsu Academy, one chilly Tuesday evening in early October. She stood outside for a moment, holding her gym bag tightly, watching the class through the frosted windows. Inside, a dozen or so students, mostly men, were already grappling, laughing, shouting pointers at each other. Mara hesitated. At 34, she wasn't old, but in this room full of energetic 20-somethings, she felt ancient and invisible. The door creaked as she walked in. Instantly, heads turned. One man, shirtless and dripping with sweat, nudged his friend and muttered something Mara couldn't hear. But the smirk was clear enough. The front desk guy, a bleach blonde kid in his 20s named Zane, looked her up and down, barely hiding his skepticism. "You here for the beginner class?" he asked, blinking in disbelief. Mara nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes. I signed up last week." He scanned his clipboard, then shrugged. "All right. Mats are over there. We're just warming up." As Mara walked toward the mats, she could feel the stares. A few of the other students exchanged amused glances. One of them, a tall guy with a patchy beard and cocky grin, chuckled as she passed. "You sure you're in the right place, ma'am?" he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mara didn't respond. She just bowed respectfully to the coach, a grizzled ex-Marine named Carlos Silva, and took her place at the end of the line. Carlos didn't say much to her. He was a man of few words, but his eyes narrowed slightly as he watched her execute the warm-up drills. There was something unusual about her movements. She wasn't fast, but she was deliberate. Her posture, her breathing, the way she flowed from one position to the next, it was polished. The class moved on to basic drills, hip escapes, guard retention, sweeps. Mara kept up with quiet focus, but the snickers didn't stop. Even when she paired off for drilling, her partner, an overly muscular guy named Trent, barely took her seriously. "You ever done this before?" he asked. "Some," Mara replied. Trent rolled his eyes. "We'll go light, don't worry." But when they started the drill, Mara's movements caught him off guard. Her timing was sharp, her balance unshakable. Trent smiled nervously. "Hey, that was pretty good. Where'd you train before?" Mara shrugged. "Nowhere special." They moved on to live sparring. Coach Carlos blew his whistle and called out pairs. When it was Mara's turn, she was matched with Trent again. "Keep it playful," Carlos warned. Trent laughed and bumped fists with her. "I'll try not to break you." What happened next silenced the room. 17 seconds into the roll, Mara slipped into De La Riva guard, swept Trent with a textbook transition, took his back before he could react, and locked in a rear naked choke. Trent tapped out in sheer panic, coughing and blinking in confusion. The mat went quiet. Carlos narrowed his eyes and stepped forward. "Again," he said, voice flat. Mara nodded. They reset. This time, Trent came in more aggressively, pushing hard, trying to overwhelm her with pressure. Mara waited. Then, with subtle movement, she transitioned to a deep half-guard, reversed the position, and secured a triangle choke so clean, Trent didn't even have time to tap. He gurgled, and Carlos had to intervene. Enough. Trent sat up, red-faced and gasping. "What the hell?" Carlos crouched beside Mara. "Who are you?" Mara looked him in the eye, calm as ever. "Just someone who likes to roll." That night, the tone shifted. No more snickers. No more side eyes. People avoided her gaze, unsure what to make of her. She rolled with 2 more students, both blue belts, and tapped them out just as effortlessly. Carlos pulled her aside after class. "You've trained. A lot." "Where?" Mara hesitated. "A few years in Japan, under Kenta Yamada." Carlos's eyes widened. That name meant something. Yamada was a legend, known for training in the shadows and rarely taking students. You're his student? Was. Carlos nodded slowly. You're not here for a beginner's class, are you? No, Mara said softly. I'm here for something else. What? She looked at him for a moment. To face someone I've been avoiding for a long time. Carlos said nothing, but the look in his eyes shifted. He understood something unspoken. There was history behind her calm demeanor, ghosts behind those steady eyes. Over the next few weeks, Mara kept coming. She never asked for attention, never tried to prove anything. But each time she stepped on the mat, she dismantled her opponents with surgical precision. Blue belts, purple belts, even one brown belt, none of them lasted more than a minute. Then came the day everyone had been waiting for. Coach Carlos posted the sparring lineup on the board. At the top of the list, Mara versus Adrian. Adrian was the golden boy of Iron Ground. 28, athletic, loud, and a freshly minted black belt. He strutted into the gym every day like he owned the place. Everyone respected him. Some even feared him. The moment the names went up, the gym buzzed. She's finally gonna get put in her place. Adrian's gonna crush her. She's good, but she's not that good. But Carlos said nothing. He just watched. When the day came, Mara arrived early. She tied her plain white belt around her waist and began stretching quietly. Adrian walked in 15 minutes late. Shirtless as usual, swagger intact. He barely glanced at her. Guess I'm teaching Grandma how to roll today, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Mara said nothing. They bumped fists. Carlos called it. Ready, go. 17 seconds later, Adrian was flat on his stomach, face red, arm hyperextended in a flawless armbar. He screamed and tapped violently. The room froze. Carlos knelt beside Adrian, checked his elbow, then turned to Mara. She stood calmly, dusting off her guy. Nice control, Carlos muttered. That could have gone bad. Mara looked him in the eye. I know. Carlos stood up slowly, the room still holding its collective breath. Adrian rolled to his side, clutching his arm. His usual bravado drained from his face. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. It wasn't pain. It was confusion. Humiliation. He looked at Mara like she was something he couldn't quite comprehend. Mara gave him a slight nod. Not mockery, not pity, just acknowledgement. Then she stepped off the mat and calmly walked to the corner, sitting down, pulling her water bottle from her bag. No one spoke for a full minute. Finally, one of the purple belts, Jonah, broke the silence. Coach, where did she actually come from? Carlos didn't answer. He just looked across the gym at Mara, who was wiping her forehead with a towel. There was no pride in her face, no sense of victory. Just a calm stillness, as if none of this had been for show, as if she'd done what she came to do, and now it was done. But it wasn't. The next week, word had spread, not just around Iron Ground, but through the local BJJ circuit. Other schools heard rumors about a white belt librarian tapping out a black belt in under 20 seconds. At first it sounded like nonsense, exaggeration, a misreported fluke. But a few people came to see for themselves. They showed up at open mats. They asked to roll with her. Mara didn't talk much, didn't explain herself. She just rolled, efficiently, brutally, cleanly. She submitted a state silver medalist in 24 seconds with a mounted triangle. She heel-hooked a regional champ so fast he didn't realize his knee was at risk until Carlos shouted for him to tap. She never celebrated. She never posted photos. She just stood up, nodded, and went back to her spot. That's when people started to notice something even stranger. Mara never used strength. She wasn't big, she wasn't fast. But her technique, her timing, her pressure, it was otherworldly. She seemed to know what her opponent was going to do before they did. It was like watching water drown fire, and still, no one knew who she really was. One night after class, Carlos approached her in the parking lot. You trained under Yamada in Kyoto, right? Mara nodded, unlocking her old Civic. But not as a hobby, she hesitated. No. Then why hide it? She looked over the roof of her car at him. Because this isn't about proving anything to them, or you. Carlos folded his arms. Then what is it about? A long pause. When I was 21, Mara said quietly. I got into a fight. A real one. Not a tournament match. Not a dojo scuffle. A real, life-changing fight. I wasn't ready for it. I froze. Someone got hurt. Someone I loved. I promised myself I'd never be helpless again. Carlos didn't interrupt. I left everything, moved to Japan, showed up at Yamada's gym every day for a year before he even let me on the mat. He taught me things I didn't think were humanly possible. And when I left, I thought I was done. But lately, I've felt it again. What? That old fear. That rust creeping in. I needed to sharpen the blade again. Carlos stared at her. You could be teaching black belts right now. I don't want to teach. I just want to remember what I'm capable of. The wind stirred leaves across the lot. Mara opened her door and got in. Thanks for letting me roll, she said. Carlos nodded slowly. Anytime. As she drove off, headlights fading into the darkness, he stood there for a long time, thinking. Back, in the gym, things had changed. People treated Mara differently, not out of awe or fear, but respect. The kind that couldn't be faked. They no longer asked where she came from. They asked to roll, to learn, to get better. She never lectured. She taught through motion, through rhythm. And gradually, the laughter and mockery that once greeted her entrance was replaced with silence. And then, admiration. But the past has a way of catching up. 3 months into her training at Iron Ground, a new visitor arrived. He was tall, with a lean build and eyes that scanned the gym like a wolf casing a forest. His GI was clean, crisp, and without patches. A plain black belt around his waist. Carlos raised an eyebrow. You visiting from out of town? The man nodded. Just here, for a roll. He didn't say much else, signed the waiver, warmed up in silence. But his eyes never left Mara, not once. When Carlos called for sparring pairs, the man stepped forward. I'd like to roll with her, he said, gesturing to Mara. She looked up from her stretch. Her eyes locked onto his, and something shifted. For the first time, Mara didn't look calm. She looked unsettled. Carlos watched the exchange carefully. You two know each other? He asked. Neither answered. They bumped fists. The moment the roll began, it was clear. This wasn't a test. It wasn't a drill. It was a message. The man moved like a predator, explosive, technical, relentless. For the first time, Mara was on the defensive. Every grip, every sweep, every attempt to escape was met with counters, pressure, resistance. For almost 3 minutes, the entire gym watched in stunned silence as Mara scrambled, adjusted, and fought to survive. Then, she reversed. In a blink, she swept him, past his guard, and moved to mount. Her breathing was heavy, her expression razor-sharp. The man tried to explode out. She transitioned to back control, locked in a choke, tight enough to sleep him. But she didn't. She held it. Then let go. He tapped, even though he didn't need to. She stood up. He stayed on his back, staring at the ceiling, chest heaving. Finally, he sat up and looked at her. You're still sharp, he said. She gave a slow nod. So are you. He smiled, a real smile this time. Yamada would have been proud. Then he stood, bowed, and walked out. No one ever saw him again. Carlos approached her quietly. Who was that? She didn't answer for a moment. A ghost. She rolled her neck, exhaled, and walked back to the wall. The room still buzzed with energy, tension, awe. But Mara sat down, took a sip from her water bottle, and waited for the next round. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was just sharpening the blade. Weeks passed, and the storm around Mara slowly settled. She kept coming to class. Same quiet demeanor, same discipline. She rolled with anyone who asked. Beginners, seasoned competitors, the overconfident and the humble. Each encounter was a silent masterclass in control, balance, and precision. But the awe began to fade into something deeper, trust. People didn't just respect Mara anymore. They confided in her, asked her to watch their roles, to give tips. Not because she demanded authority, but because she embodied it. One night, after class, Carlos called everyone in. Some of you joined this gym to win tournaments. Some of you joined to get in shape. Some maybe just needed an outlet. But I want you to look around. We're not just a team anymore. We're a place where people can grow, if they're willing to listen, learn, and leave their ego at the door. He turned to Mara, who stood quietly against the wall, arms folded. And sometimes, if we're lucky, we get to learn from someone who reminds us what this is really about. There was no applause, no grand speech from Mara. She simply bowed. That night, she stayed a little longer after the mats had cleared. Carlos approached her again. "You're done sharpening the blade?" She nodded. "For now." "Will you stay?" She looked around the empty gym, the sweat-stained mats, the echo of laughter, of effort, of struggle. "I think I might." And with that, the quiet storm that once entered the gym as just a simple woman had found her place, not above anyone else but among them, not to prove anything, just to be ready, and she was.